Hey, Richard here with Facts for Working People. Um, Sometimes I'm in lockdown like everybody else. Pretty much, I go out walking and stuff, but can't go to the pub, so I've got to take to drinking the old beer at home. Good American beer, not like when I first came to this country and it was a desert. But anyway, I wanted to talk. I was thinking today about just the education I got in this country. People, the first job I got, serious job, and I lasted my life, working life, was for a water company here in the Bay Area, and it's where I learned things. I learned about the struggle in a way that I didn't back home. I always knew I was a working class person, but I got involved in the union there. And I ended up in Central Yard, which I spent 20 odd years in. They one time called us the pharmacy because in the 80s, and the older guys with the drinking and the younger ones with weed and more damaging cocaine and stuff in the 1980s, particularly crack and stuff like that. It affected all of us in one way or another. We cleaned it up. We did it ourselves. The workers in there did it ourselves. We worked for a public agency, which makes it a lot easier. But anyway, so when I got there into Central, it was most of the older guys were all old black guys that came from the South, or their parents came from the South. They came up to work. A lot of them, Kaiser brought people up from the South after the war. But anyway, these guys were from Monroe, Louisiana, Beaumont, Texas, Alabama, Arkansas, places like that. And I got involved in the union. I was encouraged to get, what really got me sort of looking to get involved in the union was a guy who became very close friends, a black dude, Georgie Craig, for the guys that work at Edmund, the old timers like me, will remember George. And they fired Frank Allen, a buddy of his, who went into management. These were two sharp guys. Frank was very sharp. I don't know whether he's still alive. But he called one of the big bosses at the credit union a sack full of motherfuckers. Well, they fired him for that. And he didn't get his job back. So you've got to be careful about going into management. You've got less power. But anyway, so I got involved in 77, 78, but in a major way in the early 80s. And my yard was a very prominent union yard. One of the leaders in there, Solomon Jones, he was from the South, black fella. He was very involved in the union. Al Williams, another guy, but Solomon was an interesting character, and I was going to write stuff, and I wanted to tell stories a little bit that really fitting for any blue collar or any workplace in one way or another. But I got into negotiations in 1982. It was the first time I'd ever done that. And Solomon was in negotiations. I don't know if he was in negotiations I'm pretty sure he was, actually. I'd have to look it up, but I think he was. But nevertheless, he came out of my yard. He was a preacher, like quite a fair few black dudes are. And he was real, as we say in Oakland, he was real dark-skinned. That's just a local colloquialism. He was straight up black, as some of my friends used to say. He was very dark-skinned. And big fella with a dialect. I don't know where it would be from, but it was definitely a dialect of his own. And he was a very prominent in the union, an interesting character. And I think back to when I look at it now, and I believe I fought racism correctly. And for me, part of that was because of their education I got from the older black guys. They talked to me about history. They talked to me about coming from the South. They talked to me about their lives. And I talked back, of course, and things like that. And I always say it was a little easier for me as a white Englishman because I wasn't a white American. It was a little easier for me. But it just shows it's not so much color, but the social role, you know. And so anyway, but I was in negotiations with Solomon in 1982, and we were up at this meeting. We were pipemen. We called ourselves ditch diggers. It wasn't a big deal. Then we eventually got to be called plumbers of sorts and things. The struggle, I tell you, the struggle on the job is the greatest education in the world. And we were in negotiations. It was there that I first learned, when I'd look at things, that my co-workers were numbers. We were, you know, which grade or things like this. But we were in maintenance, and we were a potentially powerful union, local unit. SD1 was the crap plant. We called it the shit plant. It was where all the effluent goes. It was very important also, and quite militant. But we were, you know, ditch diggers basically. And for the black folks, a lot of them, it was very hard to get out of the ditch. It was very hard for them. You know, younger white guys would come in, they'd train them, and they'd end up getting, you know, becoming their bosses or their supervisors. And that's why you have to look at this and how racism is a social issue. Because yes, it was racism, but also the tests for civil service were very difficult. The white working guys, it was difficult for them too. But for black people, as anybody knows that's got an open mind, it's, you know, they say that the rest of America gets cold, black folks get pneumonia and so forth. Well, there was an incident that happened there, and it was, it really was important for me, without me thinking about it, in terms of my relationships with the black people and other people of colour really, but with the black people especially, the way I dealt with that. We were in negotiations, and Solomon was very, very good, but there was this inter-department pride and narrowness sometimes. And I remember there was talk about SD1, some of them were talking about wanting to leave the union. We didn't represent enough. Pipelines got too many. Pipeline maintenance, we were the maintenance department. You know, we were the guys that fix the water when they break. And in a strike, that's important too. And so there was some opportunists looking to decertify from another section of the union. And you know, and I remember somebody came in and said, when we were sitting there around a table, this is just reflecting on it as memory. I'm not looking at notes or my notes from that period. And they said something like, "Oh, SD1's threatening to pull out the union if we don't." And I heard Solomon said something like, "Fuck SD1" or something like that, you know. And I got into it a little bit with him. Well, we can't. They're part of the union. We can't do that. We've got to deal with it. We blah blah blah. And he wasn't alone in that view. It was common, you know. The shops were the shops, and you know how it is in these struggles. Skilled workers and unskilled workers, and we were unskilled workers in the main, you know, and so he said that, and I got into it with him, and anyway, it ended up with him chasing me round the table with a knife, calling me a South African motherfucker. I mean, I'm going round this is in negotiate. We was a caucusing. I don't remember management being there, and. Anyway, of course, that gets out like crazy. I'm relatively new. I've been there since 76 and active since about 78, 79, 80, something like that. And so it gets around, and you know how it does. It's Solomon chased me and blah, blah, blah. So I think back on that time, and Georgie Craig used to talk to me about it. And had I made the mistake, had I taken the bait, from any, and I'll tell you, most of the white people I work with in those 30 years, you watch social media and everything else, every white person's a racist, and they're like, you know what, I don't think maybe once or twice I heard explicit racism, and if it was said in front of me, I put a stop to it or I spoke about it. But in general, people were trying to get along with their lives. I don't, that's why it's important for me for us to see it as social. It's not just about an individual saying a nasty thing. It's social. It wasn't the guy's fault that they passed the test, and because of racism and everything else that they had more opportunities. You can deal with that, but you've got to deal with it in a way that helps unite the working class and not blames individuals, and it doesn't use guilt trips and you should this and you should that and all the crap you hear from the petty bourgeois today. Hang your coat on the door, hang your prejudice here, all that nonsense that the petty bourgeois throw around. But had I functioned incorrectly, I talked with George about it, and I never ever. I never ever talked about Solomon. At first, I had a lot of respect for him, but I never ever talked about it. I just said I made him mad. But it was sometime after that I realised what's kicked him off, and it was a racial lesson for me. In the course of the argument, I hope you can see this on here, I'd gotten tired of the back and forth, and I went, I like waved him off. Well, that set him off. Now I look back on it, well, it was some time ago, sometime after and a long time ago, I realised what it was. I'd waved him off. I'd learned a lot since then. The older guys had talked to me about history. My buddy who's up in the home there, grew up in Alabama, left Alabama when he was 20. I've made videos where I've said that I feel like I had an advantage over white Americans, my white co-workers, because I was not seen in quite the same way. And part of it is my own individual situation. But when you're in a situation where the barrier is already there, it's like when workers would say, well, yeah, or the boss always says, oh, here's a troublemaker about the union guy. Oh, here's the troublemaker, or why do you make it us and them? I don't make it us and them. Us and them is society. Us and them is society. And that's how we have to deal with racism also. You can't have decent human relations in a society that is racist or sexist or anything. You're not, because that's going to affect how people think. And it's going to be an obstacle to unity. Unless there's a conscious element there that struggles against it. And of course, I believe in times of struggle, working class people tend to move to overcome those barriers anyway. But with the help of leadership, with the help of a union, with help of people that can help bring that together, the union on the job can play such a crucial role. And we saw that, and I saw that, and I learned from it. But I never, ever put Solomon down. I never, ever talked bad about him. I never took any bait. No, I can't remember any, but I never took, if there'd have been a white guy want to make some racist remark or funny remark about that old black man, and he had an image about him who he could have been mocked. He was very dark, his language, everything that racism does. I never slipped into that. And I didn't. It wasn't my inclination to slip into that. But had I done that, the black people would never have trusted me. And I played. The old fellas that taught me on the job. Al Williams was one of them. I'll talk a bit more about this. I want to keep these short, but they're just stories for me personally, and also for any other workers, for my own co-workers, and for any other workers that want to think about. When they've been active on the job, or any union, rank and file union folks. Had I made the mistake in any way of demeaning Solomon, he was very well respected, and he was a hard fighter. He was limited, like we all have limits, but he was a genuine fighter. And we got on fine later on after that. But that's what did it. I waved him off. And I was not conscious enough about the history in this country. And rather than attack me, those guys and the ones I was close to talked to me about it and this, that, and the other. And well, that's a start off for this for me. I want to do a few of these talking about the union. We were very successful in that yard. Like I think I said earlier in this video, at one point they called us the pharmacy because there was trouble, and then they ended up calling us the Soviet, and they ended up splitting that life, splitting that yard, putting half of us, the other shop steward Roger Martinez and guys, up to one area, myself to the other area, and Joanne who was a clerk there. Anyway, that's just a couple of comments, partially for my own good. If it looks all right to me, I'm going to post it. It's just stories. And I want to do a few of them, and I might even take some notes so I do them perhaps a little more coherently. Anyway, it's Richard Mellor. I'm a retired worker. I hope this is okay. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. I'll put it on the blog, Facts for Working People, as well, and on my YouTube channel.